Lesson 49. The Ideal Servant. In this text, we'll talk about domestic servants. Now first, listen and then answer this question. What was Bessie's little weakness? Bessie 小小的弱点是什么？
It is a good thing my Aunt Harriet died years ago. If she were alive today, she would not be able to air her views on her favorite topic of conversation, domestic servants. Aunt Harriet lived in the leisurely age when servants were employed to do housework. She had a huge, rambling country house called the Gables. She was sentimentally attached to this house, for even though it was far too big for her needs, she persisted in living there long after her husband's death. Before she grew old, Aunt Harriet used to entertain lavishly. I often visited the Gables when I was a boy. No matter how many guests were present, the great house was always immaculate. The parquet floors shone like mirrors. Highly polished silver was displayed in gleaming glass cabinets. Even my uncle's huge collection of books was kept miraculously free from dust. Aunt Harriet presided over an invisible army of servants that continuously scrubbed, cleaned, and polished. She always referred to them as the shifting population, for they came and went with such frequency that I never even got a chance to learn their names. Though my aunt pursued what was, in those days, an enlightened policy, in that she never allowed her domestic staff to work more than 8 hours a day, she was extremely difficult to please. While she always criticized the fickleness of human nature, she carried on an unrelenting search for the ideal servant to the end of her days, even after she had been sadly disillusioned by Bessie. Bessie worked for Aunt Harriet for 3 years. During that time, she so gained my aunt's confidence that she was put in charge of the domestic staff. Aunt Harriet could not find words to praise Bessie's industriousness and efficiency. In addition to all her other qualifications, Bessie was an expert cook. She acted the role of the perfect servant for 3 years before Aunt Harriet discovered her little weakness. After being absent from the Gables for a week, my aunt unexpectedly returned one afternoon with a party of guests and instructed Bessie to prepare dinner. Not only was the meal well below the usual standard, but Bessie seemed unable to walk steadily. She bumped into the furniture and kept mumbling about the guests. When she came in with the last course, a huge pudding, she tripped on the carpet and the pudding went flying through the air, narrowly missing my aunt, and crashed on the dining table with considerable force. Though this caused great mirth among the guests, Aunt Harriet was horrified. She reluctantly came to the conclusion that Bessie was drunk. The guests had, of course, realized this from the moment Bessie opened the door for them, and long before the final catastrophe, and had a difficult time trying to conceal their amusement. The poor girl was dismissed instantly. After her departure, Aunt Harriet discovered that there were piles of empty wine bottles of all shapes and sizes neatly stacked in what had once been Bessie's wardrobe. They had mysteriously found their way there from the wine cellar.
So what was Bessie's little weakness? Right, her little weakness was drinking. So this text tells us about the author's deceased aunt, who lived in another age, sticking to her old way of living. She loved to talk about domestic servants and loved to take charge of an army of servants while looking for an ideal one. Bessie came in as a perfect servant, but she turned out to be flawed with drinking. From the end of the first paragraph, we know that Aunt Harriet still carried on an unrelenting search for the ideal servant to the end of her days, even after she had been sadly disillusioned by Bessie. The author doesn't tell us whether Aunt Harriet was disillusioned again, but we can almost be sure that an ideal servant is nowhere to be found. Okay, now first, let's look at some language points. If she were alive today, she would not be able to air her views. Air here means to express publicly. Look at this example. He'll air his opinions on education, whether you want to listen or not. Air, when being used as a verb, can also mean broadcast. For example, the interview with the president will be aired on CBS tomorrow morning.
对总统的采访明天早上在哥伦比亚广播公司播出。
Domestic servants. Domestic here means at home. For example, domestic violence
就是家庭暴力。
Domestic can also mean within the country,
国内的。
For example, international and domestic flights,
国际国内航班。
In that leisurely age. Leisurely here is an adjective. For example, he is walking at a leisurely pace. We know that ly as a suffix usually serves as a suffix of an adverb.
它通常呢做副词的后缀。
But sometimes some adjectives can also use the suffix of ly. Leisurely is an example. I'll give you more examples. Friendly or heavenly, orderly. These are all adjectives. She was sentimentally attached to this house. Be attached to means like or love something. We have learned attach to before. It was almost impossible to attach hawsers and chains to the rim, which means to fix to. Look at one more example of be attached to. The children are very attached to their grandparents, which means the children love their grandparents very much. Sentimentally attached. Sentimentally means you feel something from exaggerated emotion instead of from natural feeling.
滥情的。
For example, our childhood usually had less joy than we sentimentally recall it.
我们经常多愁善感地对童年回忆，但是呢，童年经常并没有这么欢乐。
She persisted in living there. Persisted in living there means kept living there. Look at more examples of persist. If you persist in causing trouble, we'll have to dismiss you.
你如果总是找麻烦的话，我们就要解雇你。
If the pain persists, consult a doctor.
如果疼痛持续的话，就去请医生。
Or we can also use persist with something. For example, the company is persisting with its ambitious program despite the costs involved.
公司还在坚持它野心勃勃的计划，尽管成本非常高。
She used to entertain lavishly. Entertain here means invite guests. We know that entertain can mean amuse. For example, a good children's program should both educate and entertain at the same time.
一个好的儿童节目应当既有教育性又有娱乐性。
We usually choose this restaurant when we entertain our clients. Here, entertain means the same as the one in the text.
招待客户。
Lavishly. Lavishly means expensively, excessively. I'll give you one more example. Her room was lavishly decorated with flowers of all kinds. The great house was always immaculate. Immaculate means perfectly clean, tidy, or faultless. For example, he was dressed in an immaculate white suit. 一尘不染的白西装。He gave an immaculate performance as the hero. 作为男主角，他的表演无可挑剔。Here, immaculate means faultless. My uncle's huge collection of books was kept miraculously free from dust. 奇迹般的。Miraculously, 它的名词是 miracle. Its adjective is miraculous. Look at this example. She miraculously lost 20 pounds in a month. 奇迹般的一个月就减了20磅。Aunt Harriet presided over an invisible army of servants. To preside over means to take charge or take control. For example, it was our dean who presided over the meeting. 主持会议的是我们的系主任。An invisible army of servants means a large group of servants. It was called invisible because the author hadn't seen them. An army of, look at this example. She brought an army of supporters with her. In the text, there's another phrase meaning a large group of, a party of guests. She always referred to them as the shifting population. Shifting here means moving or changing. The servants are called population in order to exaggerate, to emphasize a large number of servants. They came and went with such frequency that I never even got a chance to learn their names, which means they came and went so frequently or so often that I never even got a chance to learn their names. Look at one more example of frequency. He is absent from work with high frequency, which means he is often absent. If you want to say he is seldom absent, you can say he is absent from work with low frequency. My aunt pursued what was in those days an enlightened policy. Pursue means follow. Let's look at these examples to see what pursue means in each context. The hunters spent hours pursuing their prey. 猎人们花了数个小时追踪他们的猎物。Pursue means follow, literally. He has been pursuing the girl for months, but she won't go out with him. Here, pursue means follow the girl in order to date her. 追女孩子。Pursue can often go together with these objects. Pursue a strategy, 采用一种什么样的策略 or pursue a program, 进行一个项目 pursue a career, or pursue a hobby. For example, I used to enjoy playing guitar, but I no longer have enough time for pursuing any hobbies. Pursuing hobbies means spending time on developing hobbies. An enlightened policy. Enlightened is a positive word, meaning open-minded or modern. For example, the school has an enlightened policy of teaching boys to cook. She was extremely difficult to please, which means she was very hard to be satisfied. We can also use hard to please. For example, my boss is very hard to please. 我的老板很挑剔。If you want to describe somebody who is anxious to make other people satisfied, we can say eager to please. For example, the child is very eager to please. 这个孩子急于讨人喜欢。The fickleness of human nature. Fickleness is the nature of being changeable. It's a disapproving word. It's often used to describe women, weather, or certain field. For example, the fickleness of the English weather is well known. 英国天气的多变，这是很著名的。Or the fickleness of the world of pop music is notorious. 流行音乐界的多变，这个是臭名昭著的。An unrelenting search for an ideal servant. Unrelenting here means continuing for a long time. It's usually used to describe an unpleasant situation. Unrelenting can also mean extremely determined. For example, an unrelenting enemy, which means a very unsympathetic enemy. The unrelenting pressure of the job. Here it means the same as the text, the non-stop pressure of the job. She is an unrelenting opponent of racial discrimination. 她是种族歧视的坚决反对者。She had been sadly disillusioned by Bessie. Disillusioned means disappointed, but more than disappointed. It refers to illusions and ideals being destroyed, so that you become realistic or cynical. For example, as she grew older, she became increasingly disillusioned with politics. 对政治的幻想破灭了。She was put in charge of the domestic staff. Be put in charge means be given the responsibility of something. Be in charge of or take charge of means take the responsibility of something. I'll give you an example. I've been put in charge of this project. 我被安排负责这个项目。In addition to all her other qualifications. In addition to means besides. For example, in addition to his job at the university, he is running his own company. 除了他在大学中的工作之外，他还自己开公司。Or, he has a flat in Beijing. In addition, he has a villa in Shanghai. 此外，在上海还有一个别墅。She acted the role of the perfect servant. Acted the role of means she pretended to be the perfect servant. Act the role of 它的本意是演什么角色。For example, do you know who was chosen to act the role of Juliet? 谁被选作饰演朱丽叶？ Whenever they are in public, he always acts the role of the loving husband. The role of can be omitted, so we can also say he always acts the loving husband. Here act means the same as the one in the text. He pretends to be the loving husband. With the last course, course here means dish, 最后一道菜。For example, we can say a 3-course meal, 有3道菜的一顿饭。Or the first or second course. What would you have for the main course? The main course 就是主菜。She tripped on the carpet. Trip means lose balance. For example, I didn't push him. He tripped over a box. Narrowly missed my aunt. Narrowly here means barely, just. 将将擦过。For example, we narrowly missed the train means the train had just left. He was narrowly defeated by his opponent means he was defeated by very small disparity. 以很小的差距输给了对手。This caused great mirth among the guests. Mirth is a literary word meaning amusement, laughter. The guests had had a difficult time trying to conceal their amusement. It means the guests had tried very hard in order to conceal their amusement. We know that so that or such that can express the degree, 可以用来表示强烈的程度。In this text, we have two structures with so and such that, which are used a little bit differently. They came and went with such frequency that I never even got a chance to learn their names. With such frequency that actually means so often that. And in this example, she so gained my aunt's confidence that she was put in charge. It actually means she gained my aunt's confidence so much that she was put in charge. So the life pursuit of Aunt Harriet is an ideal servant. Aunt Harriet, obviously, is a member of the upper class. We can actually know something about that leisurely age from her way of living. At that time, women were housewives, taking care of household chores. They would entertain other members of the same leisurely class, and they managed a large army of servants. They claimed to be enlightened. At the same time, they were quite difficult to please. Every family was a little kingdom, and outside, the British Empire was enjoying unsurpassable prosperity, stability, and glory. Who wouldn't want to live in that age? Of course, you have to be an upper-class member. Right, so much on this topic. I'll see you next time.